Perfect. So basically what we're going to talk about today is our FortiEDR solution. So our FortiEDR is our endpoint detection and response. Fortinet, we acquired a vendor called Ensilo a couple of years ago, who were an independent software vendor doing EDR. We brought them into our security fabric portfolio, and we're now running with this as our FortiEDR offering. One of the things that we also have is our managed detection and response, which Rod mentioned, and Mark here is going to talk about after as well, which really does kind of delegate the actual management of this environment and this solution into our hands as well, so we can really help organizations and your customers from that perspective. What the EDR does is it brings a next-gen AV capabilities to your customer base. So what the FortiClient, for example, and other traditional endpoint protection does is it's all very much signature-based. With regards to the FortiEDR, it's all signatureless. It looks at behaviors and communications and processes that are happening on an endpoint to make a decision whether or not those behaviors are malicious or not. We still do obviously use signatures if we know a file is malicious. We don't want to have to waste resources executing it and then determining it based on those behaviors. So we can still block files and all that known malware. But what we do is we provide an agent that runs across Windows, across Mac, across Linux. And it really does support a whole range of operating system versions. So we actually support all the way back to Windows XP Service Pack 2, for example, all the old Windows servers. So those organizations like banks and things that may still be running those legacy operations, operating systems, we can still protect against. Now, the way that the FortiEDR works is the endpoint agent monitors the executable files on that server or on that workstation. And we use, our FortiCloud, our FortiCloud services to basically enrich the machine learning capabilities of those agents running autonomously on those. And there's two ways that we protect. We've got what we see here in this diagram, the pre-infection, where we look at the files, we look at the versions of applications that are on the servers and the workstations, identifying any possible risks, using the machine learning kind of AV technologies to determine whether or not a file may potentially be harmful or not. And then we've got the post-infection, where we can actually stop those malicious behaviors in their tracks as well. And being part of the Fortinet security fabric, we obviously do integrate with a whole range of other solutions, and allowing you to automate a lot of the responses that we might be finding as well. The FortiEDR solution itself can either be hosted in the cloud, and we actually run it in Google Cloud Australia here, so it very much is sovereign, running locally in Australia for our customers, or we could have an on-prem deployment, or we could have a mixed match of both as well. And the agent itself is very lightweight, very minimal footprint compared to some of the others. If you want to click to the next slide now, Rod. So the first part of the mitigations and reducing the attack surface is all around the kind of discover and protect components of the attack surface. And this basically we call our kind of virtual patching capabilities, because what we can do is we can have the FortiEDR reporting back the kind of operating applications that are installed on that workstation or on that server, and also then populating and enriching those versions of applications with a risk score based around, does that application have any critical vulnerabilities and things like that? Because what we can do is we can then say, well, look, you've got a version of Chrome on that workstation, and we know that version of Chrome's got critical vulnerabilities in that application version that are being exploited in the wild. All it's going to take is somebody to go and visit a booby-trapped website for that version of Chrome to become exploited. And that version of Chrome then becomes your attack vector. The idea around application whitelisting as well, we've got the that version of Chrome, you've whitelisted it, but that then still becomes the attack vector. So what we can do is we can basically create automatic rules to say, well, if a particular software application in your operating system becomes risky, there's known vulnerabilities in that application, we can use these communication control policies to basically stop that version of that application from communicating. So it's not going to stop it from executing using this communication control. We'll talk about that later. But what we can do is we can stop it communicating. So basically mitigating that threat attack vector straight away automatically. The other thing we do as well at this discover and protect side of the protections is also help you identify any potentially rogue devices on your network. any IT devices as well, because the collector that you install on your workstations and your servers, you can enable it to basically go and do some reconnaissance across your own network, report back any devices that may not have the FortiEDR installed, or report back any headless kind of rogue devices that may be plugged in that you may not know about, printers or Raspberry Pis or things like that. Again, just giving you visibility into what potentially is connected to my network as well. The next part of the prevention and the pre-infection, pre-execution is all around looking at potentially harmful files and analyzing them statically before they've actually been executed. And the way that works is it uses our kind of machine learning technologies to analyze those files and look for potentially harmful indicators in that executable. So that way we can actually determine that even a zero-day piece of malware is potentially malicious. And what will happen is the actual EDR collector agent will stop the operating system from executing that file. And if we get a chance at the end of this, I'll show you what that looks like, because even though we've never seen that file before, even though it could be a completely brand new crafted zero-day executable piece of ransomware or whatever, the machine learning capabilities, which we're constantly updating, and that kind of all that kind of AI, if you like, way of analyzing those static files, will determine that file is potentially malicious and stop the EDR from even executing. So we can, from a pre-infection perspective, we can stop malicious and risky applications from communicating out to potentially booby-trapped sites and things like that. We can stop any zero-day ransomware, any zero-day malware from even executing. By analyzing those files and doing some real-time disassembly and code analysis of them based around what we see as kind of risky or suspicious indicators. Now, we probably can't catch every single zero-day using this pre-infection. They might have done some funky code obfuscation, or use some new packer or something like that to hide the actual malicious payloads in that executable. And that's when the post-infection side of the EDR kicks in. So Rod, if you just want to jump onto the next slide now, this is where we start to talk about the actual capabilities of the EDR being able to block threats as they're happening in real time. Because what happens is when you install the FortiEDR collector, it's basically inserting itself as a kind of kernel level driver almost to sit in between the processes that the operating system's trying to process and the actual operating system itself. So when the EDR sees a particular malicious action, it makes a decision of whether or not it should allow the operating system to action that or whether it should block it. So if you think about all the malware kind of outbreaks we've seen recently and all the ways that we've had supply chain attacks, and I'm sure Mark's going to talk about some of those types of threats that we've mitigated against, doing things like DLL sideloading or hijacking processes or injecting into the various different types of memory. All of those processes that we're seeing happening in real time, the EDR makes a decision in real time and says, well, hold on a minute, this is actually suspicious or this is malicious activities, and we're going to block that. When we acquired a certain silo, we actually acquired a lot of their patented technologies as well. One of them is with regards to how we deal with ransomware. A lot of other vendors will wait for a couple of files to be encrypted, realize that's happening, try and use things like volume system snapshotting to revert them and whatnot to stop that ransomware attack from happening in real time. We do it all in memory. We do it all using this patented technology, so we don't even result in a single file ever being encrypted, even if that you were to execute some zero-day ransomware. Other things we look at as well as communication. So is this malware trying to communicate? Is it trying to talk to botnet command and control centers? Is it trying to steal data? Because one of the things you've probably seen again, in the news with ransomware outbreaks these days is it's not just about encrypting your files and holding your data to ransom that way. Because people have got a lot better at having backups and things like that, because they know that ransomware is so prevalent. But nowadays, what they'll also do is they'll also steal your data, take all that personally identifiable information from your customers, and then hold that to ransom, as well as having your files encrypted. So even if you were to restore from backups, they've still got a copy of all that data. They will then threaten to leak that on the internet and the dark web or whatever, sell it to the highest bidder unless you pay a ransom as well. And that's where the EDR can kick in to block all that communications as well, stopping any malicious communications to any external sources as well. So even if they were to leverage, some sort of zero-day exploit and like we've seen recently, Microsoft Exchange, or some supply chain attack, the Kaseya, right? If they do manage to get a foothold on that server or on that workstation through whichever means, the EDR is then going to kick in and block any malicious activities that they're trying to do. Trying to dump reverse, web shells and things like that. That's when the EDR sees all those malicious behaviors, the malicious activities, and stops them in real time. So the next slide, please, Rod. So the next slide talks about the actual remediations and reclassifications. So obviously, as an EDR, operating autonomously on all of your endpoints, making those decisions in sub-second real time, there could be the potential for a false positive. You try and launch, TeamViewer or something like that, and it starts to set up remote access or something like that. Potentially, right, that could trigger the EDR to say, well, hold on a minute, this looks slightly suspicious. But what we do, because the EDR is basically operating on that endpoint, monitoring all those processes, file operations, memory operations, registry operations, it's also sending a steady stream of that metadata back to our centralized FortiEDR management console. So each customer gets their own centralized management console. And what happens there is all of that metadata is then analyzed further by our Fortinet cloud services, so that any potential false positives that may be generated by the EDR operating autonomously can then have a bit of a bigger picture look at and go, well, hold on a minute, yes, EDR itself on that endpoint was quite correct to say that that looked like a suspicious behavior. However, Fortinet cloud services, and for those of you that know our FortiGuard is just one small part of what our Fortinet cloud services is. It's pulling in a whole bunch of metadata and information to enrich that process operations to say, well, yes, EDR on its own, the endpoint collector thought it was potentially harmful. We've stopped it in its tracks on that endpoint, but now we've taken a bigger look at it. We've determined that actually is pretty safe. And what happens in such a quick time that from an end user's perspective, that's gone from a potential false positive to a non-event. And it's been allowed then to be exempted, and that application can run. Conversely, as you can see from one of the screenshots here, if it was potentially identified as a potentially unwanted program by the FortiEDR collector and blocked that way, by enriching the metadata, doing further analysis of it, you're turning it into, well, actually, that is actually malicious. So again, that's something that kind of sets us apart from some of the competition that you may be looking at for your customers with regards to EDR, is the number of false positives is dramatically reduced by using this as well. Now, the other things we can do is we can set up automatic playbooks. So this becomes your incident response. If we have detected a malicious file, what are we going to do about it? We want to terminate that process. We want to be sending yourselves email alerts and things like that. We can also integrate with the security fabric. So being part of the Fortinet portfolio now, we've got integrations with a whole range of our solutions. And one of the newer versions we're just rolling out to our customers actually enhances all of that integrations to third party, a whole bunch of third parties as well. So what that can mean is we can then start to go and run an action on your FortiNAC. Submit that file to the sandbox for further analysis. Yes, we've detected the EDRs, determined some malicious activities, we've stopped that file. What would have happened if we had sent it to a sandbox? And we'll talk about all those different integrations shortly. But from this, automatic remediation perspective, these playbooks allow you to then, go and retrieve that potential malicious file. If you wanted to delete up any artifacts. So say, for example, the file had executed and EDR was watching what was happening and it created some registry keys, it dropped a couple of files, that's just normal behavior. But then it did something malicious and EDR stopped it in its tracks. Part of these playbooks, we'd actually go and remediate and clean up any of those registry keys that it had created and any files it had dropped as part of that kind of, respond and remediate capabilities too. And we talk about XDR as well a little bit as well. So for those organizations and customers of yours that may have a FortiMail and a FortiGate and FortiAnalyzers and things, we can start to build a bigger picture of that potential malware outbreak. Where did it come from? Oh, well, actually, it was delivered via email. It didn't have FortiSandbox, so the email went to the user's mailbox, and then the user executed it. So kind of just giving you a bit of a bigger picture with regards to where did those files come from, based around the logs that are being generated by your FortiMails and FortiGates and things like that too. So Rod, if you jump onto the next slide, please. I think it talks about the various different integrations that we have. So obviously, if you do have FortiGates and FortiEDR, we can have, as part of those automatic playbooks, we can have these connectors connecting into your FortiGates and basically saying, look, this zero-day malware tried to communicate to these IP addresses. FortiGuard doesn't know yet that these IP addresses are malicious because this is a brand new zero-day targeted at your customers' organizations. But what we can go and do is tell the FortiGate, add these IP addresses to an address object on that FortiGate, and we've got a policy blocking access to all those IPs. So straight away, any other devices that potentially may have been infected, somebody's BYO device that may not have the EDR installed, all those communications are going to be blocked. The same for the FortiNAC. Go and tell the FortiNAC to go move that potentially risky device from the production VLAN to a quarantine VLAN on that Cisco switch. And that's the benefit, if you're not aware of our FortiNAC, is that the FortiNAC is agnostic across all the switches. There were some other integrations on that previous slide as well with regards to FortiSandbox and some other things. And as I mentioned, the third-party integrations that we're adding with the latest versions is all around the ability to create, actions as part of those playbooks to drive integrations with pretty much anything. We've created the ability to upload scripts and things like that, where you can tell the FortiEDR, go and run something on a Palo checkpoint firewall, go and do something within AD, go and action something within the various different third-party SIEMs and things like that as well. Thanks, Rod. That next slide that Rod just gave us a little sneak preview of, talks all around Gartner and what they're talking about, the vision for the future these days with regards to their cybersecurity mesh architecture. I'm not sure if you've seen, Gartner's kind of new idea about what an organization should be to have really good security capabilities, but their idea is that they should have integrations. They should be sharing threat intelligence. Everything should be integrated. Everything should be automated. And if you think, for those of you that know our security fabric, pretty much, or if you reveal the next part of this slide, what Gartner have done is basically Gartner have shown us what our security fabric looks like. Rod, if you could just click to reveal. So it looks very similar, doesn't it? Except ours looks a little bit nicer. Basically, what Gartner are saying is to have the best security capabilities, you should have a mesh architecture. And for those of you that know Fortinet, we've been talking about the security fabric for 10 plus years. The idea that the solutions should all be integrated. They should be sharing threat intelligence across, reducing the threat attack footprint by having that kind of integrations. And Gartner now are kind of realizing that that's what organizations should be doing, and that's what our we've been trying to articulate to our customers for many years, having that whole integrations between all those previously disparate point solutions. So FortiEDR is fairly new to the Fortinet portfolio. It brings with you a massive security capabilities of reducing your threat attack vectors to the endpoints. And one of the things that we've seen, obviously, with COVID is that everyone has been working from home. Everyone's been locked down, previously protected by corporate firewalls, locked down by VLANs and things like that. Nowadays, people are working autonomously, working from home. So we need to make sure that the last line of defense, which is the endpoint, is protected. And that's where we can then have the FortiEDR being that last level of defense, sending all that metadata off into the FortiEDR management console, allowing you to do threat hunting, which Mark will talk about, allowing you to kind of correlate across your organization any potential trends, processes, and things like that. We give you like 500 gigs of storage in that Google Cloud instance per customer for basically storing all of that data. So allowing you to really have that threat hunting capabilities across all your devices. When we start to talk about XDR, right, that extended detection and response, the fact that organizations who may have invested in that security fabric with various different solutions can then get much more visibility into that as well. When we start talking about the single pane of glass, that single management console for managing all of your various different endpoint devices and things like that, and then integrating with those third parties, integrating with your own Fortinet solutions through those playbooks, through the APIs. The fact that we're got support for all those legacy operating systems, which I don't believe a lot of others do as well. So if you did have customers using Windows XP or Windows Server 2003 and stuff, we're still actively supporting those legacy out of support operating systems. And then when it comes to the managed detection and response, some smaller organizations may not have the teams required to be monitoring these solutions and checking for what's happening and looking at all the events. And that's where Mark's team come into play with their managed detection and response capabilities, and also their ad hoc incident response services, which hopefully Mark will talk about as well. Next slide. Cool. So 5.1 is the latest release that we're rolling out to our customers. And again, the benefit of using our FortiEDR as a cloud service is we take care of all that infrastructure. Right? We take care of all the server updates. We take care of all the patching. We take care of all the operating system updates and things like that as well. So 5.1 is our new release, which we're currently rolling out to our customer base. That brings some nice new features. One of the things we can do for those of you that may belong to an MSSP is you can buy and enroll into our MSSP program. So with the FortiEDR, there is some kind of minimum order quantities and things like that. From an MSSP perspective, you can kind of like prepay into the program, get yourselves like 1,000 seats, and then divvy them up amongst your customer base as you like. You can grow and you can shrink that customer base as you like, paying monthly as well, without having to commit to the full 12 months. One of the other features we've added, is more in-depth, Linux threat hunting. So obviously, I said we do have capabilities to protect those Linux operating systems. Adding in the metadata now to really give you some, threat hunting capabilities within the Linux operating system. And we've enhanced and expanded on our threat hunting capabilities from Windows. So all of the various different actions that we're recording from those endpoints, I mentioned memory operations, file operations, network communications and things. We can really expand the actual metadata that we're capturing to really give you visibility into what an endpoint is doing. And one of the things I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about or not, that's coming very soon, is kind of application control. So using, beyond what the communication control policy was showing, which was blocking the communications of those applications, but actually using FortiEDR to actually control the execution of applications on those endpoints as well. So some really exciting things coming, and this is currently being rolled out across various different organizations as well. The whole concept around zero trust as well. From Fortinet's perspective, we've got a whole framework around zero trust. The Forti client forms part of that, our NAC, our authenticator, and whatnot as well. And from an EDR perspective, that's where we're going to be looking at the FortiEDR to give you that application-based zero trust as well. So as we've evolved with different versions, having the ability to have, secure shell capabilities and things like that. Some really exciting new features coming in versions 5.1 and beyond. So watch out this year. We're going to be really enhancing the capabilities. Again, seeing here the various different kind of additions that we've added, around file monitoring, the fact that we've enhanced with the XDR, so really bringing in the multiple feeds for the threat hunting capabilities, like I mentioned, your FortiMails, your FortiGates, your FortiAnalyzer, hosting all those logs and enriching the threat hunting capabilities within the FortiEDR management console, so you can get a much bigger picture. It says here web filtering as well, and what that means is we're using the FortiGuard web filtering database with regards to the malicious websites categories. So again, the fact that we've got that defense in depth across our security portfolios, leveraging the various different capabilities with regards to those threat databases. So if somebody tries to communicate, or an application tries to communicate to a known malicious website, blocking that through the FortiEDR as well. One of the things we added back in Q3 as well was actually aligning the attacks to the and the malicious behaviors to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So articulating all the techniques and tactics that malware was potentially trying to do, and articulating it in that standard MITRE ATT&CK framework industry standard basis as well. So it has evolved, since we acquired it back in, I think it was 2019. But we're really, enhancing the capabilities of it with every release, and it really is a tried and tested, zero-day mitigation protection tool. Next slide, Mark, please. Cool. So from, I guess, the incident response perspective, we had already, a whole bunch of those pre-canned playbooks. Like I mentioned, disabling the, terminating the application, potentially deleting the malware, rolling back any changes that it may have made, integrating now with the security fabric, the FortiNAC, the FortiSandbox, the Forti gates and things like that we talked about. What we've started to develop last year was those third-party integrations, with some various different kind of API integrations. And what we're bringing now, coming forward, is going to be a whole range of third-party XDR support. So you name it, we're going to be able to integrate it with it. So really enhancing the capabilities from the FortiEDR to integrate with, not just our solutions now, but also any other third-party solutions that your customers may already be invested in. Next slide, Mark. Cool. So yeah, we have had, you know, we inherited a large customer base from Insilo, excuse me, when we acquired them. And we have also, you know, had some really large, you know, deployments of EDR being rolled out. You're here in Australia. We've onboarded a whole lot of customers, and Mark will probably give you some examples of some of the customer success with various different kind of industries he's seeing. But the reason, you know, we're being chosen is because, you know, with the various different kind of third-party testing we're being put through, we're coming out, you know, very high. The fact that there's minimal false positives, you know, is a massive, you know, unique point for a lot of customers. They don't want that noise. And also, you know, you've seen in the news all these various different supply chain attacks, the Kaseya, you know, supply chain hijack, the, you know, the Microsoft Exchange exploits. There was, you know, a print driver, you know, recently with Microsoft. So all of these, you know, threats that we're seeing require this level of next gen protections beyond what your traditional endpoint protection can be. The other, I guess, unique point for us is our integrations. You know, so if you're targeting your existing Fortinet customer base who've already got FortiGates or FortiMails or things like that, your FortiEDR is a logical next step for them into the EDR space. I mean, yes, they might be looking at some of our competitors, but when you can show them the value of having those integrations, you know, from a vendor that they already know and trust with regards to, you know, whatever other Fortinet solutions they've, you know, deployed, you know, that's where that value comes around the integrations and the ability to then have those next gen zero-day protections on those endpoints, really reducing the attack surface and minimizing that attack footprint. So that was a large auto dealer, a big win for us. You know, we were happy to take them on board. The next one, Mark, I think it's not as big a deal, but it was, you know, with regards to healthcare. Right, so this particular one, you know, CrowdStrike had tried to undercut us, but we won, you know, this opportunity based around the actual integration. So, you know, they saw the value in the fact that they could integrate with, you know, their existing, you know, solutions, adding in FortiMails and things like that. And that is a big, you know, a big driver these days. People are looking to consolidate their vendors. You know, Gartner are telling them to do it, and people, you know, they blindly follow Gartner. You know, so the fact that they're talking about this mesh architecture, cybersecurity mesh, which is our security fabric, you know, that's a big talking point and a big reason why people are looking at the likes of FortiEDR to then, you know, integrate their endpoint solution with the rest of their security stack as well. Jump on now, Mark. Cool. So, you know, don't just take our word for it. You know, we've got, you know, a whole range of different kind of independent testing that we go for. One of the big ones we did recently was the MITRE attack. They basically put FortiEDR through its paces, completely third-party testing. You know, we had really no influence, but basically we blocked all of the attacks straight away out the box. So no, you know, tweaking or anything like that. Turn on all the protections, and we were able to block all of the attacks that they threw at us. There's a recent academic paper that's just been published as well, which we'll talk about. You know, that has been independently verified as well. You know, very high marks. 4.8 out of 5 on Gartner Peer Insights, which is basically our customers just going there and leaving us reviews. And then we've got the A/B comparatives as well, you know, giving us a 99.8% effectiveness as well. The next slide, Mark. So this academic paper is actually very interesting, published last year. It was actually peer reviewed. You know, we get a lot of industry-based research, you know, so the likes of Gartner, the likes of, you know, NSS Labs and things doing, you know, research and putting the products and things through their paces. This particular piece of paper is actually interesting because it comes from the land of academia. One of the universities in Greece actually was funded by the European Union to go and write an actual academic paper around the testing methodologies, the capabilities of all of the various different EDR solutions out there. So this wasn't, you know, from our, you know, marketing or sales or, you know, our industry. This was from the academic side of the world. These security researchers basically went and created a testing methodology for a number of different, you know, in the wild exploits that they were seeing, and put pretty much all of the EDR solutions through its paces. And we were the only one out of the box that actually mitigated all of those threats. One of the other vendors basically really gave them some beta code and asked them to retest, and then was able to block everything. But from the initial research, we were the only ones that were able to block every single threat. So, you know, this is quite an interesting story. If you like reading technical research articles, it goes into a lot of depth about their methodologies and things. So this was a really interesting article as well. Sorry, Mark, if you just click through. Here you can see that out of all the vendors, We were the only ones to block every attack. There was one that gave them some test features that were then subsequently able to block. But all the various different attacks that they put the various different EDR technologies through, we were the only ones straight away out of the box to block against their various different attacks. So that's not just us saying it's great and it works, not just our customers saying it's great and it works. This is real academic research happening, funded by the European Union, that categorically shows that the FortiEDR can mitigate against all these threats out of the box. There was a, if you click the next slide, yeah, there was an actual webinar that went out earlier in the year, chatting to those researchers about their methodologies and things. So that was an interesting thing. So if you are interested in that, I believe it's available on the partner portal. If you can't find it, how to help them, we'll share the link. Really interesting, to know that, academic worlds are now, taking cybersecurity as, real kind of, research and giving it that level of investigations that's required beyond what the vendors and those third-party organizations are doing. So Mark, I think that was the next slide. Yeah, so Rod, did you want to give a prize, or was there questions to come here?
We'll just do this one. We might skip a couple of the others till the end because we're running out of time a little bit here. So I was just going to hand over to Karen. Are you available, Karen, at the moment? And apologies for the technical difficulties that we've been experiencing. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Rod. So as Rod said, we'll quickly go through some of these. We might skip a couple of spot prizes, but let's jump into it. If everyone could shoot through their responses through the chat, that'd be great. First person to jump in with the right answer will go into the prize pool. And the question is, what does R stand for in EDR? I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to shoot through your responses. You can either shoot them through in the general chat, or you can do it in the question section. Either way, I'll quickly go through theirs in a second.
Just while we're waiting there, for the prize, the big prize at the end there, we're looking for questions. So if you've got questions around some of the things that Rob's talking about or Mark's talking about, we'll do a little count up of the questions and see who asked the most and give it away. Otherwise, we will just go to a random select someone out of the attendees today and nominate someone for that. So.
Thanks everyone who responded. We've had quite a few responses and the answer to the question is respond. With that, I'll pass over to Mark Robertson. Mark, you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Have I got present control, or are you going to click through for me?
I'll just pass it over to you right now. There you go. You should be able to click through now on the screen.
All right, sweet. All right, guys. Thanks for having me on board today. So my name is Mark Robson. I'm a senior tactical threat analyst, and I work as part of the FortiGuard responder, incident response, and MDR teams. So they're the kind of the two services that Fortinet offers that kind of go alongside the FortiEDR product. And I'll jump today. I'm mostly going to be talking about MDR, but if you've got any questions about the IR services, feel free to reach out to me through either Rob or Rod, and we can talk about that a bit more in the future. So Rob's just gone through FortiEDR and kind of its capabilities, and he's going to go through a demo hopefully soon, just to show you, give you a bit of a sample of what the tool can actually do. What I'm going to go through today is I'm going to outline how that EDR would fit into a normal SOC's processes, and then show you how, if you don't have your own SOC to perform those functions, how MDR can do those functions, as well as, given this is what we do with our dedicated job, there's some extra functionality that we can provide that a standard SOC team might not have. So let me just jump straight into it. So this is how EDR would work and how it would kind of complement the workflow of a SOC. So starting off on the far left over here, we've got detect and block. So the actual collector on the endpoint the FortiEDR collector, will detect and block the malicious activity as it happens. So before it happens, or as malicious behavior is identified, it'll stop, that behavior. So that might be something like a fileless attack, or a compromise of an existing vulnerability that doesn't leave a file signature. It'll still block those behaviors. Now, when those behaviors are detected, related telemetry and events, like files, that type of thing, they're all collated and forwarded up to the cloud for further analysis and inspection. Then those events based off that, high level analysis, so that includes the machine learning, the online sandboxing, as well as integration with FortiGuard threat intelligence. Those events are classified, and then the classification made by the collector is verified. Following that classification, we've got automated response. So based on what the customer's playbooks are, they may do things like notify the user, open a ticket, perform remediation functions like killing a process if the process was able to start, or deleting a file, or returning registry settings back to they were before pre-compromise. Now, once all that occurs, a whole bunch of stuff needs to happen from the internal SOC team. I'll go through those functions now. So the first task is to create exceptions for false positives. So given how, tight of a grip the FortiEDR has over the endpoint, there is occasionally false positives that may need to be fixed up. So this could be because new software's come through, or a new software update's come through, which now changes slightly the behavior that a particular piece of software does, or you've got an admin who's trying to perform some admin activities. Those are the type of things that we may need to jump in and say, hey, EDR, I don't need you to block that anymore, and create an exception. We also, when there is actual true positives, so where the FortiEDR has blocked something that it was supposed to block, what we need to do is make sure that the attack associated with those events was completely contained, and that there's no other follow-up activity. Next one is to determine if there's any additional mitigations that we may need to apply. So for example, if you identify some post-exploitation activity associated with a web shell, you might need to go back and check how a web shell was able to get on the endpoint. FortiEDR would have protected you, but then what vulnerability did the adversary exploit within your system to get a web shell on in the first place? Now, those are the type of things, EDR can't do those for you. It will contain the threat, but you need to jump back in and trace that back to the initial access. We also want to jump in after an incident and determine whether the security posture of the overall system has been degraded. So if the adversary was able to get in and dump credentials, we need to be able to confirm that and then re-roll credentials for the environment. All right. And the last one is collate metrics on mitigated intrusion. So obviously EDR has a cost. It's always good to express to the C-suite how costs are adding value to your organization. This is also really useful to try to understand the threat profile associated with your network and to make sure that you can get ahead of that and mitigate any future attacks. So those functions, while not super resource intensive, for larger organizations, and if the EDR hasn't been managed properly, so the exceptions haven't been put in place correctly, or hasn't been properly tuned, that's where the MDR team can jump in and help out. So before I go into the additional ways where we can help out, I'll walk you through kind of what the team is and what we do. So we're a 24/7 threat monitoring, triage, and event handling team. Think of us as a kind of a hired SOC that will work over the top of your FortiEDR instance. We will handle the exceptions. We investigate the incidents as far as we can using FortiEDR, and then we'll collate all of that information with a set of recommendations on how you can handle events. And so all of those previous tasks I talk about, we can do on your behalf. And when we can't, due to our access to your or your customer's environment, we can collate, like I said, those recommendations and forward them on to you. So the functions that we perform are threat detection and analysis, so analyzing those events that come in. We also perform containment and remediation, so we'll be able to let you know when the FortiEDR has successfully contained an incident, and then what more you can do to remediate that. We also provide notifications and reporting on your behalf. So we do quarterly reports about the threats that we've identified, and any activity that we've successfully mitigated, as well as providing you email correspondence or FortiCare, if you prefer using the ticket system, correspondence about activities that we've undertaken in yours or a customer's network. We also perform generic, emerging, and targeted threat hunting in a customer's environment, proactively looking for indicators associated with threats. So whether that's new emerging threats, older pre-established TTPs that we've started to see in other customers' environments, or stuff that's specific to your geopolitical region and industry. We have a global team, so that's kind of the hotspots. So we've got a big group out of the Philippines, an even bigger group out of the United States. We've got a couple in Israel who cover a lot of our EMEA customers. We've got a small team here in Australia, and then we're growing larger in EMEA. The guys that we employ within our team have a high level of knowledge and experience in incident response, so triage analysis, containment and eradication, as well as digital forensics. We've got a high level of reverse engineering expertise in-house, and then we also are heavily integrated with the FortiGuard Labs threat intelligence feeds. So the additional features that we provide that may not be available to a traditional SOC or your end customer's traditional SOC are that we scope artifacts external to EDR, monitor hosts that may contain those indicators. So based off what we see from FortiEDR, we're able to quickly identify additional log sources within the environment, and then request those artifacts to include in our analysis. We also retrieve suspicious executables to perform various levels of analysis on those. So that's where our reverse engineering team comes in. So in the process of analyzing, reverse engineering those samples, we can identify additional indicators that may be present in your environment, and then go searching for that. And that's part of that confirmation that we've managed to contain a threat. But also we feed those indicators back into FortiGuard Labs threat intelligence feeds and the back end of FortiEDR to make sure that you're protected from any further attacks. We also retrieve logs, memory, and file-based artifacts using EDR to build a snapshot of what that intrusion was potentially going after and how far they got. We also develop and implement threat hunting queries for you guys to, like I said, proactively go after that stuff. Also equips the local SOC team, if we're working alongside another SOC team, to identify those threats. So all in all, what the MDR team provides is a mature detection response capability out of the box. So if your customer doesn't have a capable SOC team, but they do have a lot of endpoints and security is a concern, we can help them out. There's a reason why EDR tools are required for customers. I know at least in the US to get cyber insurance, it's because it's an effective capability. From our experience, it's only effective capability if driven correctly. So if the customer doesn't have the resources to manage an EDR and run it, we're here to help so that they can get that benefit. Having it straight out of the box restricts the need for the end customer to build and maintain their own in-house security team. For all of us that are involved in this industry, we understand that good talent when it comes to security analysts is hard to come by. So usually you end up paying a lot for a high quality team. Through the MDR, you have access to that high quality team without having to maintain that yourself. We can also augment existing monitoring capabilities with the 24/7 response. Even some of our customers who are able to, get a SOC team on board, they're not typically working, a 9-to-5 type job. We give that 24/7 coverage to augment that. You also get access to, our experienced FortiEDR team. So we have our finger on the pulse when it comes to global threat campaigns, and we also have our finger on the pulse when it comes to new updates that are coming out with EDR and how to get the most out of the tool. This fast tracks the tuning and triage in your environment. So instead of something taking a local SOC analyst a couple of hours to analyze, it'll take our guys 5-10 minutes. Also, we allow you to get ahead of the emerging threats with the threat hunting, detections, and support. So we are monitoring our threat intel sources, trying to identify those new fresh TTPs, and there's those new malware samples, and then validating that you're protected before it kind of hits your radar. So we give you that support. That's all. Rod, I think I'm not sure how we're going for time, but it's probably better if we jump straight into the demo if we're still going to be able to squeeze that in.
Sure, that sounds like a good idea.
Mark, that's 12 o'clock just now. I mean, I'm aware that I was only scheduled for the hour. We actually have a demo that Mark and our other EDR engineer, Polly, did about a month ago. So what we'll probably do is share that link rather than try and rush things just now. So Rod, was there any questions or anything like that came through for this? And we will we'll offer the demo at another time, because I don't want to try and rush things just now. I'm aware that that's 12 o'clock on the dot right now.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Let's share that link. Yes, we'll just keep it. We've got quite a few questions here, which is good. I'm just going to read out a couple for you guys. This one is from Paul Jacques. Is there a general or average time frame that the MDR post investigations occur?
So Mark, I guess that's probably dedicated to your team with regards to the response times that you guys would have with customers.
Yeah, I can try and dig up a response time. We're usually quite quick. So especially over here for APAC, because it's quiet time over there. Our business hours are not our business hours in the rest of the world typically. Our SLAs for response automatically from the EDR is 15 minutes, and then you get a human analyzing yours within the day. I think we very regularly keep that, under a couple of hours. But I have to get back to you with a detailed response time on that. But like the way the EDR tech, like Rob highlighted with the EDR tech, we usually do pre-execution blocks on most of the activity. So most of the activity that we see is follow-up of a activity that's already been blocked. So the customer will be protected, and we're just doing follow-up investigation to try to track that back to the the source about how that adversary was able to gain execution or later stages of the kill chain. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a strict answer on that one.
That's all right. Thank you, Mark. There seems to be quite a few questions around the MDR, and particularly around the data sovereignty within Australia. And there's one particular question here from Rick Hunt. Is the 24/7 MDR coverage out of Australia only, or does it rotate with the sun to other countries?
Yeah, so we use the follow the sun model. So you have analysts from across the world looking at the incidents. And when it comes to data sovereignty, the actual data itself at rest is contained in a Google Cloud instance here in Australia. So it is still held onshore, but it will be accessed by team members from around the world.
Right, thank you, Mark. Kieran, I'll just get you to jump on a couple of slides to the positioning, and we'll just spend 10 seconds on that and where to get additional data. Next slide. So here's just an overview from the ordering guide of how the products come together. Obviously, discovery and protect is your first option. Then you've got full EDR and then the XDR. So the recommendation from Fortinet is to go with the EDR. Now, across that, you can add to all three options there the NDR experience from Mark's team. Next slide. And if you want to get just some frequently asked questions here, obviously there's some packs of, you can purchase the MDR in 25, 500, 2,000 packs. Minimum seats for MDR is 500. For MDR, it's 100. There's some good MSP options. And you do need the FortiCare best practice service, which is a team within Fortinet that will help you position the product once you've purchased it for 12 months. Next slide, please. Data sheet is has a lot of information on there. You just need to Google FortiEDR data sheet to have a look through that. Next slide. And the ordering guide on the next one here. You need to log into the portal. Google searches don't find this as quickly. So once you're into the portal, just search for ordering guides and have a look at the EDR ordering guide. There's a lot of valuable information in some of the slides that you've just seen in that. Next slide. And we've just covered the questions. So really now it's about giving the giveaway, looking at some of the general responses here that we've had through. We've got a couple of close calls here. So I'm going to defer this just for reference. Look, I've got good responses from Rick Hunt, Paul Jacques, and Joe. So we'll make a decision on that just afterwards, and we'll let you know by email. Next slide, Karen. So just a really big thank you to everyone who's attended, in particular to Rob Reynolds and Matt Robson for your valuable input into this. I know I got a lot out of this, and I'm pretty sure that everyone else has as well. It's really shaping up to be a fantastic product, and I can't wait to get that installed locally on our own network as well. So thank you everyone for coming. Have a great day, and thank you.
Well, thanks for having us, Rod.
Thanks, James.
Okay.